Okay, so when you think Greek mythology, your mind probably jumps straight to Zeus, right? Poseidon, Mount Olympus. But what if I told you that's not where the story really begins? Nope. Before them, there were others. And today, we're going to dive into the absolutely wild, brutal, and totally epic story of the cosmic beings who came first. So that begs the question, right? Before Zeus was zapping folks with lightning bolts from his mountain throne, who was actually running the show? Well, the answer, it's basically a family drama on a cosmic scale. We're talking betrayal, we're talking fear, and this relentless, violent cycle that literally shaped the entire universe. So let's get into it. All right, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll go way back to the primordial beginning. Then we'll see the first big overthrow. After that, we'll get into the curse of Cronus, and you'll see exactly what I mean. We'll also meet some of the more, well, intellectual titans. And finally, we'll wrap up with the legacy of these giants. Sound good? Let's go. Okay, part 1, the primordial beginning. To really get this, you have to imagine a time before, well, before everything. Before gods, before people, before time itself. Our story doesn't start with beings, but with these raw elemental forces that would end up shaping the entire cosmos. And the very first thing? It was called chaos. Now, don't think of chaos as a person or some kind of god. It was more like a vast, dark, empty void. A giant formless abyss that held all the raw material, all the potential for everything that was ever going to exist. So out of this nothingness, the first real thing emerges. Gaia, the earth, the foundation for literally all life. And then, Gaia, she gives birth to Uranus, the sky. And here's where things get, a little weird in that classic mythology way. He becomes both her son and her husband, completely enveloping her. And just like that, we have our first and maybe the most dysfunctional family in the universe. Okay, buckle up, because this is where the themes we see all through Greek mythology really kick off. That piece between earth and sky, yeah, it was not going to last. What comes next is the first huge power struggle, a really violent betrayal that sets let's just say, a very dark precedent for all the generations of gods to come. So Uranus and Gaia, they have a bunch of kids, including these 12 super powerful beings called the Titans. But here's the problem. Uranus was a paranoid ruler. He was terrified of how strong his kids were and was absolutely convinced they were going to overthrow him one day. So what does he do? In a just unbelievably cruel move, he shoves them back inside their mother, Gaia, trapping them deep within the earth. You can imagine Gaia was not happy. In fact, this pushed her right to the edge. She is furious, and she starts plotting her revenge. She finds her partner in crime in her youngest, most ambitious son, Cronus. He's the Titan of time. So with a sickle made by his mom, Cronus attacks his own father, overthrows him in a pretty brutal fashion, and takes control of the entire cosmos. And just like that, the age of the Titans begins. So, Cronus is on top. He's the new king of the universe. But if you're thinking, great, he'll be a better ruler than his dad, well, think again. Because that same paranoia, that same fear that made Uranus a tyrant, it's about to consume his son, and it's going to lead to an even darker chapter in this whole cosmic family drama. I mean, look at this comparison. It is absolutely chilling. Just like his father, Uranus feared his kid's strength. Cronus lived in total terror of a prophecy. A prophecy that said one of his own kids would overthrow him. But his solution? Somehow, it was even more horrible. He didn't imprison his children. No. He swallowed them whole, one by one, the second they were born. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all of them. But this is the moment everything changes. Cronus' wife, Rhea, is just desperate to save her last baby boy. So she comes up with a plan. She wraps a big rock in a blanket and gives it to Cronus. And he, totally blinded by his own fear, just swallows the rock without even looking. Meanwhile, the real baby, and yep, you guessed it, it's Zeus, is whisked away to be raised in secret. The seeds of the next rebellion are already planted. So you see the pattern here, right? We started with the primordials, these raw cosmic forces. Then came the Titans, who took power through violence. And now we're right on the verge of the rise of the Olympians. And guess what? They're going to have to fight their way to the top too. Now, it's really easy to just picture the Titans as these big, dumb, destructive giants. But that's not the whole picture, not at all. A lot of them actually represented really deep, abstract ideas, things like order and knowledge. They added a ton of complexity to the early universe, and it shows this era was about way more than just brute force. Let's take a look at some of the others. You had Oceanus, who wasn't an ocean like we think of it, but this huge mythical river that circled the entire world. There was Hyperion, the Titan of Light, whose name means the one who watches from above. Pretty cool, right? And then you have Manavicine. She was literally memory personified. She'd go on to be the mother of the 9 muses, the inspiration for all art and science. And you can't forget Themis, the titaness of divine law and order. And this is where you can really see how these ancient myths still affect us today. Themis stood for natural cosmic order, the way things are supposed to be. She carried a set of scales to symbolize balance, and that single image, it has survived for thousands of years. It's the direct origin of the symbol for justice you see in courtrooms all across the globe. How wild is that? So, okay, after all that violence, all that family drama, what's the point? Why does this super chaotic origin story matter so much for the rest of Greek mythology? Well, it's because it sets the stage perfectly for everything, and I mean everything, that's about to happen. The big conflict here is really between 2 different types of power. The Titans, they represent the wild, untamed, chaotic forces of nature. Their power is raw, it's absolute. But the Olympians, led by Zeus, they stand for something totally new. Civilization, society, order, an order that's imposed on the natural world. And this epic battle between these 2 ideas, that is the foundational story for the entire universe of Greek myths. And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to chew on. This whole cycle, right? The child overthrowing the father over and over again. Is that just a crazy old story? Or does it maybe reflect a deeper truth about how progress and change actually work in our own world? The idea that every new era, every new way of thinking has to kind of fight to push aside the old one to make its mark. It's definitely something to think about.